You know, when you catch a modern headline about Somalia today, it's pretty easy to think you've got the whole story figured out. But honestly, those headlines barely even scratch the surface. Beneath all the modern geopolitical narratives lies this incredibly deep, majestic history that literally stretches all the way back to the dawn of human civilization. So today, we're exploring a land of ancient warrior herders, legendary global trade empires, and a cultural spirit that is just completely unbreakable. Welcome to today's Explainer.
To really set the scene here, I want you to completely rethink the capital city, Mogadishu. Forget the news clips from the 1990s. For centuries, it proudly held this absolutely beautiful cinematic title, the White Pearl of the Indian Ocean. It was this gleaming, cosmopolitan hub filled with towering coral stone houses and cylindrical minarets where merchants from across the known world would gather. 3,333. That's the length in kilometers of Somalia's coastline. Okay, let's dive into this because that is the longest coastline on mainland Africa. It's shaped kind of like a tilted number 7, acting as the ultimate strategic gateway right between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And this geography didn't just dictate their weather, it completely destined the Somali people to be absolute masters of the sea. Which brings us to Chapter 1, the Horn's Ancient Heart, the dawn of humanity and early civilization. We are talking about one of the earliest settled lands on Earth. Just outside modern-day Hargeisa, there's a place called Las Gil. It's a complex featuring 5,000-year-old, vibrantly colored rock art depicting cows and wild animals. And around the 2nd or 3rd millennium BC, this region actually saw the early domestication of the camel, which was a massive, game-changing leap for human agriculture and transport. This land is also strongly believed to be the legendary land of Punt, which was a crucial trading partner to the Egyptian pharaohs. It was home to the Macrobians, these warrior herders and seafarers who were so incredibly wealthy that ancient historians literally claim they shackled their prisoners in chains of solid gold. I mean, wow. Let's move to Chapter 2 and see how this builds. Empires of trade, the golden age of commerce. Throughout the Middle Ages, you had these vast Somali sultanates like the Ajuran, the Adol, and the Jilidi, just absolutely dominating regional networks. They were exporting myrrh, spices, gold, and frankincense. Their trade routes were staggering. We're talking connections with everyone from the Romans and Egyptians all the way east to the Ming dynasty of China. When the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama sailed past Mogadishu in the 15th century, he was stunned to see this massive city with multi-story houses and grand palaces. It was an economic powerhouse, deeply fueled by a thriving local textile industry known as Tube Benadir, which supplied markets stretching across Egypt and way beyond. Now, what's really interesting about this piece of history is the sheer economic brilliance behind that vast wealth. For centuries, Somali and Arab merchants had this highly lucrative, completely secret agreement. They would import cinnamon from places like Ceylon and the Spice Islands, but they managed to completely fool the Roman and Greek world into believing that the Somali Peninsula was the actual source of those spices. It was a brilliant piece of market manipulation that inflated prices and generated enormous, legendary wealth for the merchants of the Horn. So, Chapter 3, The Storm, 20th Century Turbulence. Things shifted drastically in the 1880s when the European scramble for Africa divided the ethnically homogenous Somali people into different colonial territories, primarily British and Italian. Fast forward to 1960, and those territories triumphantly united to form the independent, democratic Somali Republic. But the stability didn't last. By 1969, General Siad Barre seized power in a military coup, setting up an authoritarian socialist state. And while his regime did initially boost literacy and build up infrastructure, it eventually became highly oppressive. By 1991, following brutal crackdowns and a disastrous war with Ethiopia, the entire regime completely collapsed, tragically plunging the nation into a prolonged civil war. Which really brings us to a profound question. Think about it. What actually happens when a nation's central authority just collapses for decades? How do people survive? How do they adapt? And how do they rebuild when the traditional state apparatus is just gone? Chapter 4, An Economy of Resilience, Rebuilding from the Ground Up. Without a central government to guide them, the sheer entrepreneurial spirit of the Somali people just took over. First, they leveraged exactly what they had. Somalia still holds the world's largest population of camels, which fuels a booming livestock export market straight to the Gulf states. Then, to handle finances without any traditional banks, they expanded hawalas. These are highly advanced, trust-based, informal money transfer networks. They harness surging local investments from the global Somali diaspora. And, perhaps most surprisingly of all, they experience this explosive, decentralized growth in private telecommunications and mobile money. So the crucial point here is that this resilience sparked a very rapid modern economic shift. While agriculture and traditional pastoralism still totally dominate at about 65% of the GDP, a booming 25% now belongs to services and other modern sectors. Private airlines, advanced tech companies, and localized service industries just organically sprang up to fill the massive void left by the state. $1.6 billion. That is the estimated amount of annual remittances sent back home by the fiercely dedicated Somali diaspora living abroad. From Minneapolis to London to Dubai, Somalis send money back through those informal hawala networks we just talked about. It's a vital, absolute financial lifeline that has fueled the nation's stunning physical and economic reconstruction over the last couple of decades. Because of this wild, decentralized free market, you get these fascinating paradoxes. For example, despite lacking a central government for years, local Somali telecom companies just went ahead and partnered with massive multinational corporations to lay down their own infrastructure. As a result, Somalia frequently boasts some of Africa's cheapest and clearest mobile phone calls, plus an incredibly high rate of mobile internet and mobile money adoption. It's literally a masterclass in resilience and adaptation. And that brings us to Chapter 5, A Nation of Bards, Culture, Poetry, and Identity. You see, in Somali culture, poetry and music are not just simple entertainment. They're the primary vehicles for history, politics, and social commentary. It is an intensely oral society. Songs are these carefully crafted collaborations between the mytho, who are the lyricists, and the laksan, the songwriters. Whether you're out in the nomadic pastures of the countryside or sitting in a bustling cafe in Mogadishu, these rich pentatonic melodies and perfectly metered verses are just deeply woven into everyday life.
And this brilliantly illustrates something the rest of the world recognized a long time ago. Back in the 19th century, the famed British explorer Richard Burton traveled through the region and noted that the Somali people's ear for harmonious sounds and poetical expressions was so fine that a poorly constructed phrase would literally excite their violent indignation. Margaret Lawrence later dubbed it the nation of poets. Poetry is the absolute bedrock of their identity. Which leaves us with this final thought for our explainer today. We've looked at the ancient wealth of Punt, those brilliant medieval trade networks, the devastating modern collapse, and the staggering decentralized rebirth of its economy. So if a nation can endure empires, colonialism, and total civil collapse, yet still sing its poetry to the world, what limits can possibly be placed on its future? Thank you so much for exploring the untold epic of the Horn with me today. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.